Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We'll wait for a few seconds for everyone to join and then we can start the webinar. Okay, I think we have uh, people joining in. We can start. Welcome everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the IRENA Insights webinar series. My name is Karan Kocher and I am joining from the IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn, Germany. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I would like to introduce IRENA and our webinar series. IRENA is an intergovernmental organization with 170 member countries, and we also have another 15 countries in their accession process. IRENA supports countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future, and we also aim to serve as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, resource, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. And because our analytical work and our engagement with several members generates insights, we are constantly looking for ways to share those insights with you. And that is why we launched this webinar series over 5 years ago. We have organized over 70 webinars on various topics, and you can check them all on our IRENA events page. The link to that will be in the presentation slides, which will be uploaded on the IRENA events page. Those of you who have attended IRENA Insights webinars before would know that these webinars last approximately 30 minutes. They provide key insights of IRENA's work and sources of more in-depth information that can help you explore the topic further. However, today's webinar is structured slightly differently. In the first segment, we will have IRENA and the WTO Secretariat present the findings from the joint report titled Enabling Trade in Green Hydrogen and Derivative Commodities. And this will happen in the same fashion as we always have done IRENA Insights webinars. In the second segment, the MedGem network uh, will make another segment on enabling cross-Mediterranean trade of green hydrogen and the derivative commodities. And so in the next 45 minutes, we will hear from Frank Wouters, James Walker, Svetlana Shobanova, and Mustafa Taumi. And before I hand over the microphone to them, I have a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and posted on the IRENA Events website. You're by default on mute, but we encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask any questions. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end that will, during which we can answer some of the questions we have. And with further ado, let me first welcome Frank to our IRENA Insights webinar series. Frank, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks. I really like this format, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. I think it was originally modeled as a brown bag lunch kind of event where you not only provide food for your stomach, but also food for thought. And wherever you are in the world, whether it's your breakfast, your lunch, or your dinner, feel free to consume our knowledge that is shared with you today. The topic of trade is an important one for us as a MedGem network. I mean, MedGem stands for Mediterranean, and GEM stands for Green Electricity Molecules, and it's a platform that's supported financially by the European Commission to look at ways to cooperate and foster partnerships between Europe and the southern Mediterranean countries. And trade is of course a big part of the future in terms of how we deal with our green energy future. We've done quite a bit of work in the recent past on looking at storage. We did a study. It's currently being peer-reviewed. We're going to have a scientific publication around it. And we found that the world actually stores huge amounts of energy, 30,000 terawatt hours, which is 3 times the final energy consumption of the European Union, is in tanks, in underground gas storages, in heaps of coal everywhere. There is some batteries and pumped hydro. It's mostly molecules. And that, the reason for that storage is threefold. One, there is always some level of mismatch between supply and demand. There is strategic reserves. Ever since the oil price shock in the 1970s, the OECD countries have 90 days of oil reserves, and coal is being also seen. China mandates now 15% of strategic coal reserves. So that is another angle to storage. But the third one, I think, is relevant for this seminar, and that's actually trade. I mean, trade also leads to storage because you buy when a commodity is cheap, and then you sell it when the price is better, and in between you need storage. So from a storage angle also, I think trade is an important driver for that storage. And why am I saying this? Because if you're looking forward to what kind of storage you're going to need, and this is also going to be part of that, what you're going to hear today is investments in infrastructure. And we did an estimate of what it needs to, what it needs to achieve a net zero system by 2050 that's compliant with the Paris Agreement. We need about $9 trillion of investments in new storage. So as part of that infrastructure that is going to enable trade, I think storage is going to be a major driver of those investments because we need to have hundreds of underground salt caverns. We need many new tanks. I mean, an ammonia tank is different from an oil tank, and a heap of coal is super cheap, but the newer molecules will require some additional investments. So that is another angle that underlines also the need for those investments to make those trade flows happen. And with that, I would like to basically once again welcome you to this webinar and give the floor to the real speakers, the people that are going to give you real insights in what this trade is going to mean in the years to come. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Frank, for setting the scene there. Thank you also, Karen, for introducing the session and facilitating. I'm James Walker. I'm team lead for renewable gases at IRENA, as you'll have seen, and I'm joined by my colleague Svetlana Shabanova from the WTO Secretariat to share an overview of some work coming in part from a report we published last year, in part from some prior work that we've been doing together, and hopefully it's all crystallizing around some recommendations that we have for how the huge ambition that we see for international trade and international markets in renewably produced hydrogen and derivative commodities can be supported and enabled. And then I'm very happy we're going to bring in that into the regional perspective from the MedGem Network's work on the cross-Mediterranean corridor to bring this to life a little and apply it a bit. So before we come on to the detail of the trade work, I wanted to set the scene a bit from an IRENA perspective and put this in context of our other analyses. So next slide, please. Thank you. Just starting here with a fairly boilerplate slide that you will see in virtually any IRENA presentation that tries to distill down one of the key messages from our annual World Energy Transition Outlook exercise. So in 2024, our WTO, as we call it, came forward with these numbers that you see here in terms of what the energy system would look like in a 1.5 degree C compliant scenario for 2050. And in that you see that the headline is that electricity becomes the main carrier of energy, most important vector of fueling or powering, providing energy for the services and the facilities that we rely on. And of that 52% of electricity, the main carrier, we anticipate a renewable share of 91%. So a really important role for renewable power. And I think that will be unsurprising as a key message from the International Renewable Energy Agency, but it really is a core tenet of all of our analysis that focuses there. As you see on the right-hand side in the text, this would involve a really, really significant increase in the production of renewable power, so the capacities that we have available by 2030 and by 2050. Towards 2030, we have some political commitment to the tripling goal that's been discussed since the COP28 in Dubai, and we're working hard to support countries in tracking that and plotting a way forward to enable that future. Another parameter of this analysis that is important in the context of today's discussion is the figure we have of 14% of total final energy consumption coming from hydrogen and e-fuels, so ammonia, methanol, derived commodities. And in there, we see a really important role for renewably produced hydrogen, which is the focus of the discussion from our side. And next slide, please. Thank you. The 14% share that I've described there for hydrogen and the derivative commodities comes into play in what we describe as the hard to abate sectors from an IRENA perspective. So we're looking really at how we prioritize those commodities for their important applications in decarbonisation. And that's really important when we look at the picture in front of us. So here we've looked at 6 of the most difficult or hard to abate sectors, the ones where extra effort is required to either electrify or find alternative means of providing the energy required or the feedstocks required to decarbonize these essential services and functions across economies and the world really. You know, we rely on these commodities very, very much in our everyday life. And as you can see, coming across heavy duty trucks, shipping, aviation, iron and steel, chemicals and petrochemicals, and cement, we have a little over a quarter of global total final energy consumption and CO2 emissions. And that means we really need to focus on the solutions that can be brought forward to reduce emissions coming from these sectors. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've analysed in detail what a decarbonised pathway could look like for each sector and how the different solutions that are available between efficiency, electrification, e-fuels, biofuels, and also CCUS can play different roles. We will have a webinar on exactly this topic in a couple of weeks' time, so I won't go into this in too much detail. The main thing I want to focus on is the green box, where we see, or the box I've highlighted in green, where we see an important role in these sectors, or at least 4 of these sectors, for hydrogen, ammonia, methanol. And that's really where we see the 14% share in total final energy consumption coming from or going to, where looking at a renewable energy perspective, we're describing the indirect use of clean electricity via synthetic fuels and feedstocks, as you see. And that's where I want to focus on from here. We then have an important role in these important sectors that I've explained make up an important or a significant chunk of global final energy consumption. And that means a fairly significant quantity of hydrogen and derived commodities. So next slide, please. Thank you. That then means, by process of maths, that we need quite a lot of hydrogen. And looking towards 2050, that is a challenge for us. We need to see a fairly significant increase in production from 1 gigawatt all the way up to potentially as much as 5,700 gigawatts. That's obviously a huge increase. And our modelling suggests that under a 1.5 degree C scenario, most of that really does need to come from renewable sources, as I've already mentioned. And this is where I come back to the international markets and trade picture and the relevance of the discussion today. Because if we think about a global pathway to bring forward this production capacity, we're going to need to be sensible about where we deploy some of this production based on where renewable inputs are most cost effective, thinking about balancing supply and demand and different local contexts. And in that fairly complicated picture, as we attempt to optimize a flow of energy internationally, we can start to think about how there may be channels through which these commodities that we're discussing could be traded, either regionally or over intercontinental distances. And that's what we've been looking at in the work that we're talking about today. So next slide, please. Just to underpin this a little bit analytically, some of our very clever colleagues who've been trying to think about how the commodities move from A to B, where the demand is, where the supply is, optimized based on renewable inputs. We've prepared a visualization on a few different scenarios of different trade flows based on how you change the input parameters and the assumptions, how you balance costs of certain commodities and inputs in certain parts of the world. And one of the scenarios is depicted in front of you here. Again, I won't go into this in detail because the good news is we have a focused webinar on this modelling again in about a month's time. So lots to look forward to on this topic. But I think the key message is that we can identify pathways between parts of the world where we will need to develop the infrastructure, the trade agreements, the physical infrastructure, the ports, the pipelines, the various enablers that we need to move the commodities between points of supply and demand. And you can see on the left-hand side, we have some further detail on which commodities we think play a bigger role in certain scenarios. And you can you can find this in the published report that's referenced at the bottom, or hang on for the webinar in about a month to learn more. Next slide, please. I have two more context slides that I'm going to try and get through very quickly. These are basically looking in the focused analysis we have that's considering the regional context that we're discussing today in the pathways across the Mediterranean and in the southern Mediterranean countries. I will leave most of the input here to Mustafa in a few minutes' time, but I just wanted to introduce that from an IRENA perspective, we've been looking at ways that power and gas and other renewable commodity connections can be maximized across the Mediterranean to think about how the renewable resources available particularly in the southern Mediterranean countries and in the North African region can really transform the region into a renewable energy superpower and also satisfy extensive demand for energy inputs in the northern Mediterranean countries. And we have some analysis here that shows a really significant pipeline of interconnection planned. Perhaps we'll discuss some of the measures needed to actually facilitate the development of all of these connections later. One more slide, please. Thank you. And we've also then looked in quite a lot of detail at the availability of renewable resource inputs, water inputs, land availability in these southern Mediterranean countries that are the focus of the figure and in part the discussion today. And really we've identified a number of geographies in which there are extensively abundant resources available to facilitate really low cost production of hydrogen and also the derivative commodities. And we see this as a great opportunity for those countries and their neighbours, and that gives us a really good background and context for the discussion today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So against that backdrop, that energy system context, that energy transition opportunity, as discussed, we have been working closely with our friends and colleagues at the World Trade Organization to understand what this means for countries. So we've been trying to quantify the opportunity, we've been trying to consider what these trade flows look like from a quantitative perspective in different scenarios, and then thinking about the policy and particularly the trade policy implications that this picture has for countries and policymakers. And I'm going to hand over to Svetlana in a moment to talk about that, because of course the WTO are the experts on the trade policy side, and that's a real strength of the partnership. We're bringing this energy and trade expertise together. But we want to focus on the publication in the middle. So this is our report that's looking at enabling measures, and that's across physical, institutional, and social enablers that we think can bring forward these sectors more rapidly, more effectively. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the report, we break this down into three categories. We have physical infrastructure, so that's pipelines, ports, energy inputs across power and gas. Institutional, that's largely trade policy, but not exclusively. And then social, where we're considering how governments can manage the acceptance of these commodities in communities and maximize job creation opportunities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we cover 11 enablers in the report, and we won't be able to go through them all today. We wouldn't manage to get all the detail in, so please do consult the report and find the elements that are more or less relevant to you and your own contexts. I've mentioned some of the physical infrastructure enablers that we see around the development of pipelines, for example, ports. A key recommendation from our side on the energy planning perspective is thinking about how the infrastructure availability, resource availability, energy transition plans and strategies look in a given country or region, and really trying to optimize your planning for these sectors to account for that. So that's number one. We also then see an important need to maximize supply chain diversity and resilience. That's number three. That's a key underpinning to developing all of these systems, infrastructures, facilities, and there are many other considerations in there. I've been talking for quite a while. I definitely want to hear from Svetlana on the other half, or the very important half of this picture. So I'm handing over now for the institutional enablers and the trade policy picture. Thank you.
Many thanks, James, and that was an excellent introduction and overview of our work together with IRENA. So I'll briefly focus on the trade perspective in the next 10 minutes. Indeed, just the highlights of what we are discussing in the report. So feel very much welcome to read through and see specifically what might be interesting for you. So what we call institutional enablers in the report are really the policy tools available to government in order to navigate their policy space as it concerns hydrogen and its derivatives, and to choose the appropriate tools to boost demand, supply, and use trade as an enabler for the development of these sustainable markets. Next slide, please. So I'll focus very briefly on 5 of those, starting with standards and certification. We talk in the report about the importance of aligning standards or reducing divergences in certification schemes. Why is that? Because international standards and certification, to begin with, play a very important role in providing a framework to measure and verify the environmental integrity of hydrogen and its derivatives, how they are produced, their environmental sustainability, etc. And having a common understanding of what qualifies as a renewable or green hydrogen, how this is being measured and verified. Well, this can go a long way in facilitating trade, reducing the information asymmetries between producers and consumers, and finally ensuring transparency of markets. What we see on the landscape of certification and standards is that there are quite a lot of challenging with the wide range of national and also regional certification schemes that exist. Some of them are really with a national scope, others are regional, and even they have the ambition to become global. Why? Because there are different approaches of how they classify hydrogen, what they consider as a definition of renewable. There are different thresholds for emissions. There are different criteria and methodologies on how to account for emissions, on how to, what are the thresholds for those. There are different system boundaries even on how you measure the CO2 emissions throughout the life cycle. So these differences create unpredictability for producers. That may try to export to multiple destinations. They can increase their transaction costs. And finally, there is a reduction in the effectiveness of these reduction efforts. So it follows from that there is a need for a continuous coordination to align, depending again on what's the purpose of regulators, what's their aim, but there is normally a need to align technical criteria for defining what you consider as green or sustainable or low carbon. There is also a need for greater interoperability or alignment, if you want, in certification schemes, even if they might not be the same. Certain key components could be aligned and recognized in order to provide more clarity for investors and developers. Next slide, please. In this sense, in this sense, there are certain developments, positive developments in the area, not so recent anymore, perhaps, like the ISO methodology for determining the emissions throughout the life cycle of hydrogen. This is independent of how it is produced. It could be fossil fuel based, it could be renewable, it could be there could be other production methods, but the idea is to align the accounting of how you measure these emissions throughout the life cycle, depending on the production method. At COP28, a number of countries also agreed or expressed their intent to work towards the mutual recognition of their certification schemes. And more recently, at the last COP last year, there was another broader declaration that also endorsed the importance of working towards these global standards, together with other policies that are really accompanying this process, like stimulating demand, investment in R&D, and financial support and just transition for developing countries. And this is a very important point here, because developing countries do need technical assistance to establish things like quality infrastructure. So the infrastructure to be actually able to measure and account for these emissions, as well as to establish conformity assessment systems to verify compliance with these standards. They might actually have the schemes in place, but how you measure that is another question, and support is needed there. So strengthening these capacities can obviously ensure that producers in these markets can join the global hydrogen trade. Similar for commodities, I'm not going to linger there, but depending on their end users, different set of standards and schemes could be necessary. Next slide, please. Government procurement and government support, so subsidies, are another important tool, let's say the carrot in the toolbox of governments. What do? They lower the risks for investors. They ensure stability of demand for those that are producing. And so they basically drive sustainable market development. Together with these, tax incentives could also offer a similar strategy in order to encourage demand. And from our international trade perspective, it's important also to not forget that there are certain international trade rules relating to these policies that, very broadly speaking, came to ensure that they're transparent, they do not discriminate between countries, and basically with the underlying came to ensure fair competition. Now, depending on what objectives governments have, whether it's supporting demand, whether it's encouraging investments or bridging the price gaps between traditional fossil fuel-based fuels, fossil fuel-based hydrogen and its renewable counterparts, there can be also indeed different tools, different ways to stimulate and to support these objectives, like targets and quotas, fiscal policies, government tenders, contracts for difference, very widely used. So we describe and we go into quite a detail on those in the report. Again, depending on which derivative commodity and how government would like to stimulate demand and a demand for it, there could be different strategies. For instance, if the aim is to shift towards using sustainable fertilizers, then subsidy support could be redirected towards green ammonia, for instance. Next slide, please. A third tool that we talk about is tariffs. So what do we do with tariffs? How do we rebalance them in order to stimulate demand, to reduce technology costs? Now, this could be a very important tool to drive the development of sustainable energy systems. And currently, the point is that for hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol and e-kerosene, well, they're classified under the same headings, independently of how they are produced. That means that crossing the border, they would incur the same customs tariffs independently of whether they're produced using renewable energy or fossil fuels. At the global level, the World Customs Organization, which sets the system for classification, it functions in a way that classification is based on how on the physical characteristics, on the end uses of the product. So they don't necessarily take into account certain production methods that will not then have an effect on the product characteristics, the way it is with renewable hydrogen, for instance. And so there could be, however, effort to green the system in the sense of technology. So, for instance, there are efforts to green DHS and make more visible certain technologies like fuel cells or electrolyzers. However, and I need the next slide for that, if government would like to cooperate, for instance, to make green hydrogen or its derivatives more visible, well, then at the national level and at the level of regional cooperation, that could be done by creating separate tariff classifications for these products. And for instance, right now, the IPHE, the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells, I believe, they have certain initiatives working with governments in order to see how national tariffs could be developed and eventually differentiated. Governments could also work on reducing or eliminating tariffs in hydrogen-related technologies, and there are certain examples like the WTO Information Technology Agreement, where countries came together and decided that for a number of information technologies products, they're going to agree and zero tariffs for those products. That's a good example of how, for instance, markets could develop in the future. Next slide, please. And I'll very briefly go to the two more slides, and I'll leave you with that. We also talk about carbon pricing mechanisms. So we know that a number of carbon taxes and emission trading systems already exist. They have their sort of, if you want, the stick in the toolbox of the government, whereas subsidies support green solutions, carbon taxes, emission trading that makes polluting, that makes CO2 emissions more expensive. There are a number, more than 70 different such schemes, and they differ widely. So similar point as with regulation and standards here, these divergences basically create costs, and more cooperation to align the approaches would ensure a more level playing field and would promote efficiency. Next slide, please. And finally, a final point, which is cross-cutting, is about international cooperation. There are multiple fora to do that and ensure more alignment of policies, more interoperability in a number of bodies, committees at the WTO. Members are doing exactly that. On trade and environment specifically, for instance, now they're looking at measurement, reporting, and verification methodologies, and whether there are challenges, opportunities for alignment, but many other bodies working on standard subsidies as well. There are other key international initiatives, including IRENA's collaborative framework on renewable hydrogen, which also provides a platform for knowledge sharing, capacity building. And all of this can also help, including the voice of developing countries, in the big scheme of things, offering them opportunities and helping them realize that comparative advantage that many of them have in producing renewables, including renewable hydrogen. I will stop here. Thank you very much. I have one more slide, which is a case that you can look at yourselves on, for instance, case study on the application of these enablers in Chile and how different, again, tools used within this toolbox can be complementary and help achieve the objectives we've talked about. Thank you. And I'll pass on the word then to Mustafa to provide the regional perspective from the MedGem.
Thank you very much, Svetlana, James, Karen, Frank, for your useful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Also to share insight on the enabling trade in green hydrogen and derivative commodities across Mediterranean perspective. So next slide, please. Yes, as an introduction, according to the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, green hydrogen could supply up to 14% of global energy, the final energy consumption by 2040. This is particularly relevant for the South Mediterranean countries, which enjoy abundant renewables resources and are strategically well located close to Europe. My goal today is to highlight the technical, economic, and also regulatory conditions that can enable effective hydrogen trade between the two regions, the EU and the South Mediterranean countries. Next slide, please. Yes, definitely the global hydrogen outlook. I'm just sharing, what IRENA published, recently. So globally, the hydrogen demand is expected to reach 260 million tons per year by 2050. So achieving this scale will require a huge capital, around 2.5 trillion US dollar in investment, and including 4.7 terawatt hours of renewable power, and also 2.1 terawatt of electrolyzer capacity. The drivers are clear. So both Europe and some Mediterranean countries are looking to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors, the industry, shipping, aviation, and also fertilizers. So countries rich in renewable resources, like those in our region, will naturally become exporters, while energy-intensive economies located in Europe will depend on imports. So next slide, please. So definitely in Europe, under the Repower EU plan, the European Union aims to consume 20 million tons of renewable hydrogen by 2030. Half produced domestically and half will be imported. By 2050, North Africa could supply, that is, some estimations, nearly 18% of Europe total hydrogen demand. The region, low production cost, the geographic proximity, as I mentioned, and existing also gas networks position it as a Europe natural clean energy partner. So this evolving relationship, it's not only about decarbonization or climate change, it's about building a sustainable European Mediterranean clean energy hub. Next slide, please. So definitely the South Mediterranean countries combine exceptional solar and wind potential with irradiance with levels that can compete with other, region above 5.5 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. With this, its proximity to European market, it's naturally it's a good opportunity for both regions. So existing also the natural gas pipelines like the Maghreb, Europe, and Transmed pipelines can be, all those pipelines can be repurposed for hydrogen transport. And we have also the emerging project like the South Hydrogen Corridor, linking Tunisia and Algeria with Italy, Austria, and Germany, will provide a large scale transport routes across the Mediterranean. So these are the advantages that make the region a logical hydrogen supply hub. Next slide, please. So now let's look to some national ambitions. So as ambition for some North African countries, particularly for Algeria, aim to develop 10 gigawatt of electrolyzer by 2040, and also expand this to 1 million ton of hydrogen. So for Egypt, the same, as announced, more than $80 billion in hydrogen and ammonia investment. Many of those projects are located or will be located in the Suez Canal zone. Morocco, the early mover, because they developed and framed this green hydrogen roadmap by 2021, have the ambition to be a net exporter for Europe, and Maghreb Europe pipeline existing. This infrastructure will enable this ambition. Also, the EU has a strong partnership, which is called Green Partnership with the EU. Tunisia also has some ambitious targets to export 8 million tons of hydrogen by 2050. And they have also now engaged in a very useful connection, the L-Med cable. This is for the green electrons to Italy, and now they are also developing this H2 corridor with Algeria to export, the green hydrogen to Europe. So together, these initiatives underline a regional momentum toward export-led hydrogen economies. So next slide, please. Well, definitely, I will not, repeat the same messages as James and Svetlana also mentioned, because we have to see what are the enabling conditions for trade. But I will focus only on few, because as we are developing our work plan and we are performing, some gap analysis. And also some studies that we have performed in many countries, in South Mediterranean countries. So I think three main pillars are, from our opinion, are essential, and we can mention them as a priority. Svetlana mentioned the standards and certification definitely is a key pillar and the priority, and we start doing pilots, pre-certification, one in Morocco, and also some trainings on those aspects, and that is can be duplicated in other countries. So that is, I think, the harmonization is key. Harmonize all those certification, warranty of origin, aligning with the international organization standard ISO, with also the EU regulation and the RED 1, RED 2, RED 3, and definitely the renewable fuels for non-biological origin rules. The second pillar is the infrastructure and the logistic, because it is very important for trade. Without those infrastructure, I'm not sure that's any of the countries can export their green commodities or green hydrogen or green ammonia to Europe. So through pipelines, through shipping. So we need, port, we need cross-border pipelines. And the integration with the Trans-Mediterranean Energy Clean Tech Initiative, the TMED for regional interconnection, it's a key enabler, and I will just mention a few things about it. So the third pillar, and we did recently, a holistic holistic screening of the finance and de-risking in the South Mediterranean countries. So it was mentioned that we need to lower the weight average of cost, capital, and through blended finance. And EU is having also some initiative on this, and we'll talk about them on next slide. So we have also the necessity to have a public-private partnerships, particularly for the sharing infrastructure and for investment on those huge, pipelines. The support via Mediterranean Pact of Clean Energy Diplomacy and Funding Alignment will give, a political umbrella to all those initiatives. Next slide, please. Let's talk just a few about the carbon pricing and the CBAM, what it's called CBAM. I think it's drive green hydrogen trade, and will favor green export by penalizing carbon intensive products. That is, I think, very important, and we have also in this aspect created a help desk especially for the South Mediterranean country stakeholders, actors, to ask questions about the certification and the CBAM, and it is very useful. The program, like also H2 Global, I think it's very important to mention those very concrete initiatives that offer price guarantee for imported hydrogen. The trade facilitator, as Svetlana, also James, called for reduced tariffs, and also for harmonized safety rules, harmonized certification. But at the end, we have this, kind of opportunities, the regional cooperation, to align those standards, certification, investment strategies, all those things together. So next slide, please. Yeah, definitely the benefits are shared for Europe. Reliable renewable imports mean industrial decarbonization and energy security. For the South Mediterranean countries, hydrogen trade drive economic diversification, new industries, and also green jobs. But at the end, all the whole region will strengthen, the political and economic cooperation on a sustainable foundation or a systemic basis. So yes, next slide, please. I think we have. Yeah, now definitely the regional integration is one of the key pillars of the EU framework for developing green hydrogen. Through the transition to the TMED initiative to bring countries, industries, and investors together to align their hydrogen and electricity plan under one holistic framework. So pipelines, port, and the grid connects seamlessly across border. But we have, as I mentioned, the Mediterranean Pact take this further, making clean energy and hydrogen a core pillar of cooperation between the EU and the Southern partners. Now is the time, as it was mentioned and also highlighted in many occasions, it's time to move from planning, from discussion, from those PowerPoints to action. So to the TMED upcoming call for regional pilot project is, I think, a very strong message that will support cross-border corridors. It will support the certification, the systems, and join also investment. This is the moment for countries and partners to step forward and turn the shared ambition into concrete results. Last slide, please. Well, definitely, to conclude, the hydrogen economy represent, in our opinion, the next chapter in the European Mediterranean cooperation, because all the conditions are there, and we have to take advantage of this momentum. So the South Mediterranean offers the renewable potential. Europe offer the demand, offer also the technology, the expertise, and the capital. To bridge the two, we need harmonized standards, financial mechanisms, and integrated infrastructure, and MedGem will continue to play a vital role in connecting these dots. And the time also for action is now, so that the Mediterranean become the world's first green hydrogen trade hub through this Mediterranean Pact and this TMED initiative. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank, James, Svetlana, Mustafa, for the presentation. Unfortunately, we are running a little bit over, so we will not have time for a dedicated Q&A section. But I encourage everyone who attended and who have questions to write to me. My email ID is kkochar@irena.org. That is KOCHHAR@irena.org. And I will forward the questions to the speakers and facilitate the discussion. I would like to thank all the speakers again for the time. I think it was a very comprehensive presentation. And I would also like to thank the participants for joining us today, for their attention, and we hope everyone learned something new. The recording and the slides for this webinar will be posted on the IRENA events page for those who missed any part of the webinar or would like to revisit it. I will see you in a couple of weeks with some of the new webinars that James had mentioned in his earlier slides. I wish you a great rest of the day, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.